The objective of this lesson is to multiply a whole number by a decimal in the tenths using a hundredths grid. In previous lessons, students learned to represent decimals using hundredths grids. One flat represents one whole, one column of the hundredths grid represents a tenth, and one box in the hundredths grid represents a hundredth. Sydney is training for a marathon. She decided that for the next 4 days, she would run 2/10 of a mile farther than she usually runs. By the end of the 4 days, how much farther did she run than usual? This would be written as 4 multiplied by 2/10, or 4 groups of 2/10. Start by coloring in 2 columns of the hundredths grid to represent one group of 2/10. Using a different color, color in 2 more columns. Do this until there are 4 sets of 2/10. There are 8 columns or 8/10 shaded in. Sydney ran 8/10 more miles extra. Let's solve the same problem using the box line dot method. Start by writing the equation 4 groups of 2/10 equals. Draw 4 circles to represent the 4 days Sydney ran extra miles, or the 4 groups. Draw 2 lines in each circle to represent the 2/10 extra miles Sydney ran each of the 4 days. Count up the tenths for 2, 4, 6, 8/10. Sydney ran 8/10 extra. Let's solve another problem using the hundredths grid. Shanika chose 2 different fabrics for a blanket she is making. She would like 1 4/10 yards of each one. How many total yards of fabric is she purchasing? There are 2 groups of 1 4/10 yards of fabric. The expression is written as 2 groups of 1 4/10. To represent the 1 4/10 of fabric, shade in 1 complete flat and then 4 columns of another flat. There needs to be 2 groups of 1 4/10. Start by shading in another flat and then 4 more columns of the flat that isn't completely full. There are 2 flats and 8 columns shaded in. This represents 2 8/10. Sydney purchased a total of 2 8/10 yards of fabric. The objective of this lesson was to multiply a whole number by a decimal in the tenths using a hundredths grid, and we met this objective by solving decimal multiplication problems using the hundredths grid, the box line dot method, and the standard algorithm.